Emily Carter had imagined this day so many times that it almost didn't feel real when it finally arrived. The lakeside venue in Vermont looked like something out of a dream still water, reflecting the pale blue sky. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, soft music floating through the summer air. Emily stood at the edge of the aisle, her fingers wrapped tightly around her bouquet, trying to steady her breathing. This was supposed to be her moment. Just one day where she wouldn't feel invisible. She glanced at her parents in the front row. Her mother dabbed her eyes, though Emily couldn't tell if it was from emotion or habit. Her father checked his watch, impatient as always. Nothing had changed there. Then Emily saw Lauren. Her older sister sat confidently among the guests, legs crossed, chin lifted. Lauren wore a designer dress that was far more expensive and far more eye-catching than Emily's simple gown. Her lips curved into a faint smile, the kind that always made Emily's stomach tighten. Lauren hadn't congratulated her, hadn't helped with the planning, had barely acknowledged the engagement at all. Emily had hoped naively that today would be different. The music shifted. Daniel appeared at the altar. Everything else faded. Daniel Reed stood tall and composed, his dark suit perfectly pressed, his expression calm but warm. When his eyes met Emily's, something inside her settled. He didn't look nervous or distracted. He looked certain, like this was exactly where he was meant to be. That was why she loved him. As Emily walked down the aisle, whispers followed her. Some kind, some curious, some judgmental. She ignored them all and focused on Daniel's steady gaze. When she reached him, he gently took her hands, grounding her. The ceremony passed without incident. Vows were exchanged. Rings slipped into place. Applause erupted as they were pronounced husband and wife. For a brief, fragile moment, Emily believed she had made it through unscathed. The reception began under strings of warm lights. Laughter echoed across the lawn. Glasses clinked. Daniel's friends, quiet, respectful people Emily had never fully understood, offered sincere congratulations. Emily relaxed just a little. Then Lauren stood up. She topped her glass with a fork, the sharp sound cutting through the music. Conversations faded. Heads turned. Emily felt her chest tighten. Lauren smiled brightly. I just want to say a few words about my little sister. Emily's hands trembled. Growing up, Lauren continued, Emily was always, well, different. Not exactly driven. Not exactly impressive. She laughed softly and a few guests chuckled along. Unsure, Emily's face burned. But when she told me she was getting married, Lauren went on, I realized something. She's always known her limits. The laughter grew louder this time. She found a man who doesn't outshine her. No flashy career. No big reputation, just safe. Lauren turned toward Daniel, raising her glass. Perfect for someone who's always been a bit pathetic. The word hit like a slap. The room fell into an awkward silence, followed by scattered laughter, some nervous, some cruel. Emily couldn't breathe. Her ears rang. She searched the faces around her for support, for outrage. For anyone to stop this. No one did. Her parents stared at the floor. Emily felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Slowly, she turned to Daniel. She expected anger, rage, embarrassment. Instead, Daniel's expression didn't change. He squeezed her hand gently, as if to say, I'm here. Lauren smirked, satisfied, and sat down. The band resumed playing. The party went on, but something had shifted. Later that night, long after the guests had gone, Daniel stood alone on the balcony of their hotel room. The lake reflected the moonlight below. He pulled out his phone and made a single call. It's Daniel, he said calmly. Yes, I need you to put everything on hold. Effective immediately. He listened, nodded once, and hung up. Inside, Emily sat on the bed, still wearing her wedding dress. Staring at nothing. She had no idea that the humiliation she endured that night was only the beginning, and Lauren had no idea what she had just set in motion. Emily sank into the chair by the hotel window, watching the moonlight ripple across the lake. Her wedding dress crumpled around her, and the laughter from earlier still echoed in her mind. Lauren's words, they weren't just cruel, they were familiar. They had always been familiar. Growing up in Connecticut, Emily had learned early that Lauren was the perfect daughter. Straight A's, varsity captain, scholarship offers. Emily was the quiet one, the one who blended into the wallpaper, who smiled and nodded and never caused a scene. Every birthday, every school event, every family photo was a reminder Lauren belonged at the center of attention. Emily existed on the edges. Lauren had a gift for humiliation that she wielded effortlessly. She stole Emily's first boyfriend, justifying it to herself as love at first sight. She whispered lies to teachers and bosses, making Emily look incompetent. And every time Emily tried to stand up, her parents intervened with the same refrain. Lauren's just confident. You're too sensitive. It was exhausting. And for years, Emily had simply endured, but Daniel had been different. They met in Boston at a quiet little bookstore cafe. Emily had been fumbling with a stack of philosophy books when Daniel approached, calm and patient. He didn't make a joke. He didn't ask her where she worked or why she was single. He just asked quietly, "Do you need help with those?" She had nodded, startled by the kindness. From that moment, he had never made her feel small. Every question he asked, every gesture he made her feel seen. She didn't know much about his life. He was private, understated, but that didn't matter. He was reliable, intelligent, and somehow quietly extraordinary. Lauren had hated him from the start. She didn't like that Emily had someone who respected her, someone who wasn't intimidated by Lauren's arrogance. She didn't like that Emily had a secret she couldn't touch. And now, at the wedding, Lauren had made sure everyone knew it. Her toast was a public performance of cruelty designed to humiliate Emily in front of family, friends, and strangers. The word pathetic had cut deeper than any slap or insult ever could. Emily closed her eyes and remembered the tension of the reception, the way guests had laughed politely at Lauren's cruelty, the way her parents had avoided looking her in the eye, the way Daniel had simply held her hand, calm and steady, letting her know she wasn't alone. It was strange. Emily realized how powerless she had felt even when the person she loved was standing beside her. But Daniel had his own way of handling things, quiet, calculated, precise. She remembered the balcony later that night, the moonlight on the lake, and the phone call he made. Something was happening behind the scenes, and Emily didn't fully understand it yet. For the first time in years, she wondered if there was more to Daniel than she knew. Not more in the sense of wealth or status, he had never flaunted either, but more in the sense of capability. A presence that demanded respect, even if no one around him realized it. Emily thought about Lauren too, about how she had spent her life shaping Emily into someone small, someone fearful, someone easy to dismiss. And she thought about how different things might be now. Lauren had assumed she would always be in control, that Emily would always shrink away. But what if she hadn't? What if Daniel's quiet strength was exactly the counterbalance Emily needed? Emily felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: anticipation. Not the nervous anticipation of a bride hoping her wedding would go well. Not the anxious anticipation of someone used to being overlooked. But a quiet, steady anticipation of what was coming next, because Daniel's calm wasn't passive. It was deliberate. And Emily had a feeling that Lauren's arrogance was about to collide with a reality she would never see coming. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to smile. The humiliation of the wedding day was far from over. But for the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, The tables could turn. And Lauren had no idea what was about to hit her. The weeks after the wedding were supposed to be joyful. Emily thought she would be floating on cloud nine, wrapped in newlywed bliss. Instead, she found herself watching Lauren everywhere she went on social media, at family gatherings, even subtly in emails and messages. Lauren's smug face appeared constantly, like a shadow she couldn't shake. And then the subtle chaos began. It started with Lauren's fiancé, Mark. Emily had never liked him much, but she had tolerated him. Now he began losing deals, big lucrative deals, without warning. Investors suddenly pulled out, contracts evaporated overnight, reputations faltered. Friends whispered in boardrooms. Nothing seemed to make sense. Lauren was furious. She refused to believe it was coincidence. "Emily, I know you did something," she hissed over the phone one night, breathless with anger. "Mark's career is collapsing, and I know it's your fault. Tell me what you did." Emily paused. Her hand tightened around the phone. "I didn't do anything, Lauren," she said softly. "I promise." There was silence on the other end. Lauren, of course, didn't believe her. She never did. What she didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that Daniel was quietly orchestrating the storm around her. Daniel wasn't flashy. He didn't own a luxury car, didn't post about his wealth, didn't boast of power. On the surface, he seemed ordinary, polite, understated, almost invisible. But behind that calm exterior was a mind honed for strategy, influence, and precision. He had spent years working as a high-level federal consultant, advising on corporate compliance, risk management, and financial security. His work was invisible, untouchable, often uncredited, but it could shift entire industries if misused. And right now, Lauren was standing smack in the middle of it. Emily had no idea how far Daniel's influence reached. She didn't need to. She only knew that he had promised her one thing: to protect her, to watch over her, and to ensure that her life was hers to live, no matter how loud Lauren tried to be. Lauren began noticing the signs herself. Her social calendar grew strangely empty. Invitations she had counted on no longer arrived. Old friends stopped returning texts. The whispers began quiet, insidious, and damaging. She called Mark, accusing him of incompetence. He denied everything, blaming unseen regulatory complications and mysterious third-party audits. Lauren's world, meticulously crafted to project perfection, began to crumble. And every time she tried to trace the source, she hit a wall. Meanwhile, Emily started to see a different side of Daniel. He didn't celebrate the chaos. He didn't gloat. He didn't speak ill of Lauren. Instead, he simply observed, waited, and acted in silence. Emily began to understand something she had never fully grasped before. True power didn't need to shout. True power was subtle, precise, and unstoppable. One evening, Emily and Daniel were walking through a quiet park near their home. Lauren had sent another frantic, demanding email. Daniel glanced at Emily, expression unreadable. "She thinks I'm punishing her," he said quietly. Emily shook her head. "You're not?" "No, I'm simply letting reality follow its course," he replied. "People who hide behind arrogance, cruelty, and manipulation eventually find themselves exposed." Emily smiled faintly. "So she's going to figure it out eventually?" Daniel's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. "Yes, eventually. And when she does, she realized she underestimated us both." Emily felt a rush of vindication she hadn't experienced in years. All her life, Lauren had tried to make her feel invisible, helpless, and weak. Now Emily stood beside the one man in the world who could quietly and irreversibly shift the balance of power. Lauren didn't know it yet, but the man she had mocked, dismissed, and ridiculed was not the pathetic nobody she believed him to be. And Emily finally understood that her life, once overshadowed by Lauren's cruelty, was about to change forever because for the first time in her life, Emily wasn't just surviving. She was protected, seen, and most importantly, untouchable. Lauren, meanwhile, was unknowingly standing at the edge of a storm she could not escape. And Daniel? He was calm, as always, waiting for the perfect moment. Lauren Carter had always believed she was untouchable. She had a meticulously curated life, the perfect fiancé, the perfect career, a social circle that hung on her every word. She walked through Manhattan offices and country club events as if the world owed her attention. But lately, things were off. It started steadily. Invitations to charity galas she had counted on vanished. A brunch with old college friends? Cancelled. A high-profile networking dinner? She received no reply. At first, Lauren shrugged it off. She assumed it was coincidence, scheduling conflicts, or trivial misunderstandings. But the pattern became impossible to ignore. Then came Mark, her fiancé, the man she had relied on to cement her social power, had started making mistakes, critical, inexplicable mistakes. A $12 million deal evaporated overnight due to a regulatory review that came out of nowhere. Another partnership dissolved with no explanation. A third investor suddenly backed out, citing unforeseen financial concerns. Lauren confronted Mark. "What's going on?" She demanded, pacing their luxury apartment in Midtown. Mark looked uneasy, avoiding her gaze. I don't know. Everything's fine, supposedly. Just complications. Complications? Lauren spat. This is beyond complications. My career, our reputation, it's all falling apart. Mark swallowed hard. I don't know who's behind it, but someone's manipulating the situation. Every angle we try to fix, poof, gone. Lauren's stomach twisted. She had always prided herself on control. Her image, her plans, her dominance, it had never faltered. And yet now, she felt powerless. For the first time, she had no idea who was pulling the strings. It was Emily, but not Emily directly. Daniel Reed. The man Lauren had humiliated at the wedding. The pathetic nobody she had mocked in front of family and friends. The man whose quiet demeanor had fooled everyone. The man she assumed was unimportant, unconnected, and insignificant. Lauren didn't know it yet, but Daniel was everywhere. Not physically, not ostentatiously, but strategically. His network was invisible but unstoppable. Corporations, investors, legal teams, regulatory boards, they moved in ways Lauren could never predict. And each move subtly dismantled her carefully constructed world. The tipping point came during a lavish dinner at a private club. Lauren tried to smile to maintain her composure as she met with her fiancé's business partners. But whispers began circulating quiet, almost imperceptible at first. Then the questions came. Why did the deal fall through? Are you sure everything is secure? We're concerned about risk exposure. Lauren floundered. Her usual poise failed. She attempted to charm, to negotiate, to placate, but nothing worked. Everywhere she turned, doors were closed. Partners who once sought her approval now ignored her. Investors who once clung to her words now refused to return calls. And in her panic, Lauren remembered Emily. She picked up her phone and dialed her sister's number, fingers trembling. Emily, you did this, didn't you? She demanded, voice sharp but edged with fear. Emily sat calmly at her kitchen table, Daniel beside her. I didn't, Emily said, sipping her tea. I promise. I haven't done a single thing. Lauren's voice rose. Don't lie to me. Every deal is falling apart, every connection is gone, and I know you and your husband are behind it. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low, steady, and controlled. Lauren, I didn't ruin your life. You did that yourself. What? Lauren's breath hitched. Daniel continued, unflinching. You humiliated Emily, publicly, cruelly, intentionally. You used arrogance as a weapon. That doesn't earn respect. That doesn't earn power. That earns consequences. And people notice patterns like yours, even if you don't. Lauren's face paled. She tried to interject, tried to argue, but the truth landed too sharply. Daniel wasn't retaliating. He wasn't scheming. He was observing, calculating. The chaos that consumed Lauren's life was not revenge. It was the natural fallout of years of arrogance, cruelty, and entitlement. Lauren sank into the nearest chair, speechless. Her entire world, the world she had spent decades building, was unraveling, and there was nothing she could do. Not because Emily or Daniel had struck, but because the universe had finally caught up with her. Outside, Emily felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered with relief. For the first time in years, she realized that standing beside Daniel meant she was safe. She didn't have to fight or prove anything. The storm would do it for her Dot and Lauren. Lauren had no idea how completely the ground beneath her feet had already disappeared. Lauren's world was collapsing, and she still didn't understand how or why. Every plan she had made, every advantage she had counted on, was evaporating. Deals that had seemed guaranteed slipped through her fingers. Friends and allies who had once laughed at Emily now quietly turned away from her sister. Invitations disappeared. Prestige evaporated. Dot and Maureen, for the first time in her life, felt powerless. She stormed into Emily's home one rainy afternoon, the kind of rain that blurred the city streets and mirrored the turmoil in her chest. She banged on the door until Emily, calm and composed, opened it. "Emily." Lauren's voice cracked, though she tried to keep it firm. "You did this. You and Daniel. You ruined everything. Mark's career is over. My contact's gone. Everyone gone. Admit it." Emily stood in the doorway, the image of serenity. "I told you, Lauren. I haven't done a single thing." Lauren laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Don't lie to me. I know he's behind it. I can see it. Everything I built destroyed. You think I don't notice your husband's influence? That he isn't the man behind all this?" Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile. "He's not punishing you, Lauren." Lauren blinked, confused. "Then what? He's helping me?" Emily shook her head. "No, he's simply letting the consequences of your actions fall where they belong." Lauren's knees buckled. She sank onto Emily's couch, her hands gripping the cushions. "I humiliated you. I called you pathetic. I ruined your wedding. I thought that would matter. I thought I was untouchable." Emily took a step forward, calm but firm. "You've spent your entire life trying to convince me I was nothing, that I'd never be anything. And for a long time, I believed you." Lauren stared, unable to respond. Emily continued, her voice steady. "But things are different now. I am not the person you once knew. And Daniel isn't the man you think he is." Lauren's eyes narrowed, a mixture of fear and disbelief. "What do you mean?" Emily motioned for Daniel to step forward. He did, his calm presence filling the room. Lauren's eyes widened, finally taking in the quiet authority he carried. "I am who I am," Daniel said, his tone measured, precise. "I work in positions you would never hear about. I advise companies, boards, and even government agencies on compliance, financial risk, and strategy. I have no need for flash, fame, or status. But I am aware. I am capable. And I do not forgive cruelty lightly." Lauren's mouth went dry. The arrogance that had carried her through so many years faltered, replaced by fear. "Why, you're serious?" Daniel nodded once. "Your fiance's deals didn't fail because I wanted revenge. They failed because people who exploit and belittle others eventually run into walls they can't see coming. I simply let those walls exist. Lauren's shoulders slumped. For the first time, she was forced to confront the reality she had always refused to see. Her arrogance, her cruelty, her need to dominate, these were her own undoing. Emily finally stepped closer. You thought humiliating me would make you powerful. You thought calling me pathetic would hurt me. But it didn't, because I wasn't alone. And because I finally stand beside someone who doesn't let cruelty go unanswered. Lauren's hands trembled as she sank deeper into the couch. I didn't know, she whispered. I never knew that he was... Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. Lauren had finally seen the truth. The man she had dismissed, the man she had mocked, was the quiet force behind her collapse. And the woman she had tried to diminish, Emily, was finally untouchable. Lauren had begged, shouted, and tried to manipulate that she had failed. For years, she had believed she was untouchable. Now, she was powerless, exposed, and broken. And Emily finally realized something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, a deep, uncheckable sense of freedom. The woman who had called her pathetic was no longer the one in control. Daniel reached for Emily's hand. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Emily nodded, finally allowing herself to exhale. For the first time in her life, she felt truly safe, and Lauren had no idea that she was standing on the edge of a world she could no longer command. Lauren had never felt fear like this before. She had always been in control. Her voice, her plans, her charm had always commanded attention. But now, as she stood on Emily's doorstep, drenched from the rain, her confidence had evaporated. Her perfectly styled hair clung to her face. Her expensive heels were soaked. Her hands shook as she rang the bell for what felt like the 100th time. Emily opened the door, calm and composed, her eyes sharp but not unkind. Behind her, Daniel stood silently, a quiet presence that made Lauren instinctively shrink. Emily, Lauren began, her voice breaking. Please. You have to help me. I didn't know it would go this far. I made mistakes. Big mistakes. I can fix this. I can... Stop, Emily interrupted, her tone calm, almost cold. Stop talking. You had years to fix this, Lauren. You didn't. You humiliated me at my wedding. You spent my whole life making me feel small. And now, you come here begging? Lauren's hands flew to her face. I'm sorry. Please, Emily, I didn't mean. Daniel stepped forward slightly, his gaze locking on Lauren. I didn't ruin your life, he said evenly. You did that yourself. Lauren flinched, as if struck. She opened her mouth, then closed it. But your husband, he's the one who... Everything? Daniel repeated, his voice calm but with the weight of authority. No, I simply observed. I've been watching, waiting. I didn't act until you revealed yourself for what you truly are. Arrogant, cruel, entitled. Everything you've lost. That's the natural consequence of your actions. Lauren sank to her knees on Emily's pristine foyer floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. I can fix this. I can make it right. I can beg him. I can, please. You have to let me ask him to help me. Emily looked down at her sister, her expression unreadable. For decades, she had endured Lauren's insults, manipulations, and public humiliations. And yet now, Lauren was begging, powerless, and exposed. And Emily finally had the choice she had longed for. She could step in, or she could let Lauren face the consequences of her actions. She turned to Daniel. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, leaving the decision entirely in her hands. Emily met Lauren's eyes and said softly, firmly, no. Lauren gasped. What do you mean no? I can't survive this. Please, Emily, you have to... No, Emily repeated, stronger this time. I am done being small. I am done letting you have power over my life. I am done letting you humiliate me. You made your choices. I made mine. And my choice is to stand beside someone who respects me, someone who values me, and that is enough. Lauren shook her head, unable to process it. You're cruel. You're letting me. Emily stepped back, her eyes softening. I'm not cruel. I'm free, and you are finally facing the world as it is, not how you think it should be. Daniel remained silent, observing Lauren's collapse with the patience of someone who had seen arrogance unravel countless times. No one needed to strike her down. Her own choices were enough. Lauren finally sat back, defeated. Her perfect world, built on manipulation, charm, and cruelty, had crumbled. She had nothing left. Emily closed the door gently. Rain splashed against the glass, and she allowed herself to exhale. Years of fear, humiliation, and being overshadowed melted away. She was finally unshackled, standing on her own terms. Outside, Lauren remained on the doorstep for a long moment, staring at the closed door, powerless, alone, and broken. Every instinct she had relied upon her whole life had failed. Every plan she had thought would save her had collapsed. Inside, Emily turned to Daniel. He took her hand and squeezed it. Are you okay? He asked. Emily nodded, a smile spreading across her face. Better than I've ever been. For the first time in her life, she was untouchable. And Lauren? Lauren had no idea that her world would never recover. Lauren Carter had spent her life believing she was untouchable. Socially, financially, personally, she had always commanded attention, orchestrated events, and manipulated people to serve her ambition. But now, that carefully constructed world was crumbling, and the reality was inescapable. Deals she had counted on had evaporated. Investors, once eager to court her favor, now ignored her calls. Social invitations disappeared without explanation. Former friends whispered behind her back. Even Mark, the man she had depended on to bolster her status, grew distant and cold. Every attempt to regain control failed spectacularly. Meanwhile, Emily and Daniel thrived not with ostentation, but quietly, steadily, like a force Lauren could neither see nor anticipate. Emily had moved on, building her new life with Daniel in a way that exuded confidence and authenticity. No one needed to know the depth of Daniel's influence. The consequences of his quiet, precise power were enough. Lauren, desperate, tried one last time to regain control. She called Emily repeatedly, her voice shaking. Emily, you have to intervene. Please, Daniel can help me. You have to tell him. Emily's hand hovered over the phone, then calmly set it down. She refused to engage. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She didn't feel obligation. She felt relief. Daniel, ever quiet, observed Lauren's frantic attempts. He never gloating, never taunting. His patience and discretion amplified the consequences of Lauren's arrogance. Every failure she experienced, the social snubs, the lost deals, the whispered rumors, was compounded because no one knew who had orchestrated it. But everyone felt the effect. Lauren's empire, built on charm and intimidation, had nothing left to prop it up. Invitations to galas and parties ceased. Colleagues who had once laughed at Emily's modesty now refused to be seen with Lauren. Her parents, who had long admired her perfection, finally glimpsed the pattern of cruelty that had dominated their household, and they recoiled. Her highest. Lauren had mocked Emily publicly at her wedding, calling her pathetic in front of family, friends, and strangers. That single act had triggered a ripple that now reached far beyond Emily's knowledge. Emily had not sought revenge. She had simply stood beside someone who was capable of protecting her, of ensuring that those who had done her harm felt the consequences of their actions. The final blow came quietly. A mutual acquaintance approached Lauren with news she couldn't ignore. Mark's latest venture had failed catastrophically, and the board had removed him from the project entirely. Lauren, who had depended on him to elevate her, was left exposed. Her carefully maintained reputation built on control, charm, and appearances was now in ruins. Lauren attempted to salvage what remained. She reached out again, desperate and pleading. "Emily, please, I can't survive this. I need him. You have to intervene." Emily, standing beside Daniel, looked down at her sister with a calmness she had never felt in her life. "No, Lauren," she said softly. "I will not intervene. This is your consequence, not mine. You chose arrogance, cruelty, and humiliation. You set these events in motion, and now you will face them." Lauren slumped, finally realizing the full extent of her defeat. The woman who had called Emily pathetic now had no one to turn to. She was isolated, powerless, and publicly diminished. Emily took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. She felt a profound sense of liberation. For years, Lauren had overshadowed her, ridiculed her, and diminished her self-worth. Now, Emily was free. She didn't need to retaliate or plot revenge. Standing beside Daniel and living authentically was the ultimate response. Daniel reached for her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Emily nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "Better than ever," she said. And in that moment, Emily understood the truth. Power was not in cruelty, arrogance, or dominance. Power was in patience, intelligence, and quiet strength. Lauren had called her pathetic at her wedding, but in the end, she was the one truly exposed. Pathetic wasn't Emily, it was Lauren. The world had witnessed the collapse. Emily had witnessed it in silence. And the woman who had tried to destroy her had finally learned that some people are untouchable, not because they shout, but because they stand firmly with someone equally unshakable at their side. The tables had turned. And for Emily, that was more satisfying than any vindictive act could ever be. A year had passed since that fateful wedding day, and the world looked entirely different to Emily Carter. She stood on the same lakeside deck where she and Daniel had first spent a quiet evening after their wedding, the soft ripple of the water reflecting the winter sun. She had never felt lighter, freer, or more alive. Emily glanced at Daniel, who was calmly sipping his coffee, eyes scanning the horizon. The man everyone had underestimated, the man her sister had mocked as a nobody, was as steady and unshakable as ever. And Emily? She had changed too. She had grown confident, assertive, and unapologetically herself. The years of being belittled and overshadowed were gone, replaced with a quiet power she had never known existed. Lauren, by contrast, had vanished from their world. Her social invitations had ceased entirely. Former friends avoided her calls. Mark, once the support she leaned on, had ended their engagement quietly, citing irreconcilable professional failures and personal instability. Her parents, who had long idolized her perfection, finally recognized the pattern of cruelty and arrogance they had tolerated for decades. And Lauren? She was alone, completely. Every day, Lauren felt the sting of her own arrogance. She had mocked Emily publicly, called her pathetic, and believed that such humiliation would cement her dominance. Instead, it had been the catalyst for her own undoing. The consequences had arrived with precise, quiet inevitability, not because Emily had sought revenge, but because Emily had stood beside Daniel, and Daniel had simply let the natural outcomes of Lauren's behavior unfold. Lauren had tried to plead, to beg, even to manipulate her way back into some semblance of her old life. She had stormed into Emily's home, begging for intervention, promising change. But Emily had finally drawn the line. She had stepped back, refused to intervene, and watched as the world she had so carefully controlled collapsed under the weight of her own misdeeds. And Emily realized something profound. She didn't need to strike Lauren down. She didn't need to plan intricate revenge or expose Lauren publicly. True justice wasn't about confrontation or retribution. It was about living fully, authentically, and unafraid. That in itself was the ultimate power. Daniel, as always, had been her anchor. He had acted with patience, precision, and foresight. The failures that Lauren experienced weren't orchestrated as acts of vengeance. They were the inevitable results of her choices. And Daniel had ensured Emily's life remained untouched, protected by the quiet, unstoppable force of his expertise. Emily smiled at the memory of that wedding day, the humiliation, the laughter at her expense, the sting of being called pathetic. She had once felt small, invisible, and powerless. Now, she felt larger than life, not because she had destroyed anyone, but because she had claimed herself. Lauren, meanwhile, had been forced to confront the truth she had never accepted. Her arrogance, her cruelty, and her obsession with control were the very things that had led to her downfall. She had underestimated Emily and, more importantly, Daniel. She had assumed that mockery could harm those who were quiet, that cruelty could dominate the patient. But she had been wrong. Emily took a deep breath, the crisp air filling her lungs. She thought of her life, now her career, thriving quietly, her friendships genuine, her marriage filled with trust and respect. She had everything she had ever needed, and more importantly, she had finally learned to trust in her own strength. Daniel placed his hand over hers, a subtle reminder of his unwavering support. Emily glanced at him, a smile curling her lips. "You knew all along," she whispered. "I knew enough," Daniel replied softly. "I always do." And in that moment, Emily understood fully. The word that had been used to wound her, the word pathetic, had never applied to her. It had applied to the sister who had spent a lifetime trying to diminish her. The sister who had assumed arrogance and cruelty would protect her. The sister who now stood alone in the wreckage of her own making. Emily's laughter, quiet but filled with relief, echoed across the lake. She had survived. She had grown. She had claimed her life. And the woman who had tried to destroy her? Pathetic wasn't Emily. Pathetic was Lauren. The tables had turned completely, the lesson unmistakable. Emily Carter was free, untouchable, and finally, victorious in a way that required no vengeance, only truth. Patience and strength. The wind rustled through the trees. The lake shimmered, and for the first time, Emily felt the world belonged to her entirely, and she knew one thing with perfect clarity. She would never, ever allow anyone to make her feel small again.